Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Calvin Reed, and for 19 years I was the senior controller at Vandrix Systems, a mid-sized manufacturing company built on legacy, integrity, and a handshake culture that was disappearing faster than I could audit a line item. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't political. But I was thorough and loyal to a fault. I started in the early 2000s under Mr. Warren Vandrix, the founder. Old school guy. Always said, the numbers don't lie. People do. He'd walk the factory floor every morning with his sleeves rolled up and grease on his hands, and I admired the hell out of him. But times change. After Warren passed, his son, Bryce Vandrix, sold the company to a tech-focused investment firm out of Chicago. They brought in sleek executives and Italian loafers who knew buzzwords but not blueprints. One of them was Melinda Crane, our new CFO, a polished shark who smiled like she'd already counted your funeral flowers. At first I stayed out of the way. I wasn't gunning for a promotion. I just kept the books tight, the audits clean, and the vendor payments honest. But then little things started happening. Invoices were marked paid with no matching product deliveries. Budget lines were showing duplicate expenses disguised under different codes. Travel reimbursements exceeded policy by thousands, but were rubber-stamped approved. I raised concerns respectfully, privately. Melinda smiled thinly and said, "Thanks, Calvin. We'll look into it." They never did. Instead, a new hire appeared out of nowhere, Trent Mallory, a smug little VP with zero background in finance, but lots of vision. Within months he was made Director of Strategic Resources, whatever that meant, and suddenly all approvals started flowing through him. Then came the email. Subject: Department Restructuring. I was called into a sterile meeting room with Melinda and Trent seated across from me like executioners dressed for brunch. "Due to a strategic reorganization," Melinda said without looking up from her tablet, "your position is being eliminated effective immediately." I was stunned, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction. 19 years reduced to a paragraph and a cardboard box. "We'll need your badge and laptop," Trent added, smirking slightly as if he thought he'd won a game I never agreed to play. A security guard I'd known for a decade escorted me to my office. I nodded at familiar faces who suddenly found the floor fascinating. Loyalty meant nothing anymore, not here. What they didn't know was that inside my leather portfolio, a gift from my late wife Dana, was a USB drive. And on that drive? 3 years of financial discrepancies, fake vendors, and damning internal memos. Every irregularity I'd flagged, copied, and cataloged. Not because I planned revenge. Not yet. Because Warren Vandrix had taught me one thing above all else: you're not just keeping books. You're keeping people honest. And what Melinda Crane and Trent Mallory didn't realize: I wasn't leaving with nothing. I was leaving with the truth. When I walked out of Vandrix Systems that afternoon, the sky was overcast, but it wasn't raining. It should have been. I sat in my car, that same aging silver Accord I'd driven for 12 years, gripping the steering wheel like it was the last thing tethering me to reality. A few co-workers passed the lot exit. Some I'd mentored, some I'd covered for when they needed time off, and none looked my way. 19 years. I turned the ignition, pulled out, and drove home in silence. No radio. No thoughts. Just the hum of betrayal eating through my gut like acid. My house, small, quiet, and filled with reminders of Dana, felt suddenly cavernous. She'd been gone 5 years now. Cancer doesn't care about love or loyalty either. I used to drown the grief in routine. Spreadsheets, audits, budgets. I didn't go home to an empty house. I went home to a mission. Now the mission was gone. I placed the cardboard box on the kitchen counter. The contents looked pathetic outside the context of my office. Family photos, a stress ball shaped like a dollar sign, a framed quote from Dana that read, "Integrity is doing what's right even when no one's watching." I poured a glass of the 12-year Glenfiddich I'd been saving for a special occasion. This counted. But as the burn slid down my throat, it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like failure. I'd worked weekends, holidays, stayed late when no one asked me to. I'd been loyal, careful, honest. And for what? To be pushed out like expired milk by a woman who didn't know the difference between gross margin and gross misconduct? I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about the last conversation I had with Dana before she passed. Her voice, barely above a whisper, "Don't let the world make you small, Cal. Even when it breaks your heart, stand tall." Well, my heart was definitely broken. But I wasn't sure I had anything left to stand on. The next few days blurred. I ignored calls. Avoided the neighbors. Just floated from room to room like a ghost, the silence in the house louder than ever. I kept opening my laptop, staring at the folder labeled contingency evidence, then closing it again. I wasn't a whistleblower. I wasn't a hero. I was a 59-year-old man who just got his identity ripped out from under him. On the 5th day my daughter showed up. LA. All fire and brilliance. Partner at a law firm in Boston, home for the weekend. Dad, she said the second I opened the door, what the hell happened? I gave her the sanitized version. Corporate restructuring. You know how it is. Don't give me that, she snapped. You were there before Bryce's father was cold in the ground. You ran that department. I didn't want to burden her. She had her own life. But she sat me down, opened her laptop and said, talk. Now. So I did. Not everything but enough. Enough that her expression shifted from concern to fury. They can't do this, she said. 19 years and they're just erasing you? It's not just me, I said quietly. They've been erasing a lot of things. And then, for the first time, I told someone about the files. Her eyes widened. You kept evidence? 3 years worth. And you didn't say anything? What was I going to do? Go viral on LinkedIn? I sighed. I didn't even know if I was crazy until the day they booted me. She sat back thinking. Then said something that stuck with me. Sometimes silence isn't noble, Dad. It's complicity. That night I opened the folder again. Read through the files. The fake vendor accounts. The forged consultant invoices. Expense reports for retreats that were actually Vegas benders. But none of it made sense. Not until I saw the name Evergreen Holdings show up on a wire transfer memo. I knew that name. Evergreen was a shell company used in 2 other acquisitions by the same Chicago investment firm that bought Vandrix. Both companies had restructured their senior staff before collapsing under fraud investigations. Suddenly the despair cracked just a little, and something colder crept in. Resolve. This wasn't just personal. It was a pattern. A machine. And I had seen enough of the gears to know where they were grinding the bones. I didn't want revenge, not yet. But I wanted the truth. And I wasn't going to let Melinda Crane rewrite my story without a fight. Not if I could help it. The following morning, I found myself standing in front of a coffee shop 2 towns over, heart thudding in my chest like a slow drum. I wasn't there for caffeine. I was there to meet someone I hadn't spoken to in almost a year. Riley Chin, a quiet, detail-obsessed data analyst who used to sit 3 cubicles down from me. She'd always kept to herself, always left exactly at 5 o'clock. But when she found an invoice discrepancy in the project management software last year and brought it to Melinda, she was reassigned to janitorial records. She quit a month later. But not before sending me a cryptic Slack message I'd never deleted. You're not crazy. Look deeper. Evergreen's the key. At the time I thought she was just venting. Now I knew better. When she walked in, her eyes scanned the cafe like someone being hunted. Her black hoodie was pulled low over her face, and her knuckles were white around the coffee cup she gripped like a lifeline. Calvin, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. If you're here to play corporate soldier, I'll walk. I'm not, I said. They fired me. That earned me a full stare. Then I guess you're ready for the truth. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a well-worn folder. Pages highlighted, redacted, notes scrawled in the margins. Then she slid over a second item. A flash drive, almost identical to mine. What's this? Everything I pulled before I left. Internal emails, payment trails, metadata logs. Most of it's encrypted, but I cracked 2 layers. Enough to confirm what I suspected. And what's that? Vandrix wasn't just being looted, she said. It was being prepped for collapse. I frowned. Come again? Have you ever heard of a bust-out scheme? I had. But not in this context. It's when someone intentionally overloads a business with fraudulent debt, extracts as much as possible, then lets it fail, she continued. Evergreen Holdings is a ghost company. They own nothing. But they've consulted on 3 other companies that went belly up. Same pattern. Same executive reshuffles. Same audit blind spots. I sat back stunned. You're telling me this wasn't just corruption. It was sabotage. Engineered failure, she confirmed. And Melinda? She's done this before. Under different names. My skin went cold. I opened my portfolio and pulled out my own drive, laid it on the table. This has vendor payments, double-billed invoices, even contract approvals for projects that never existed. Riley gave a tight smile. Then we've got them from both ends. I leaned forward, voice low. I've been talking to my daughter. She's a lawyer. And a federal prosecutor I went to school with. He said we need more. Something beyond spreadsheets and policy violations. Riley hesitated, then said, "How do you feel about talking to someone in D.C.?" That night, Riley introduced me, securely and carefully, to a man named Mason, a quiet presence from the Office of Inspector General. His voice was calm, but every word carried weight. "I've heard whispers about Evergreen," he said. "But until now, we haven't had anything actionable." "You do now," I said, sending over a compressed version of our evidence. When Mason called back 24 hours later, I knew it was serious. "Mr. Reed, you're sitting on a live wire. What you've uncovered may constitute interstate financial fraud, securities violations, and pension fund theft." That last one made my blood run colder than anything else. Pension. Mason confirmed it. We found early indications that Vandrix's retirement accounts were being leveraged, collateralized, and quietly drained into external investment vehicles. If that's true, hundreds of employees may have lost their futures. I thought of Mark in production, 40 years on the floor. I thought of Janice in shipping, who told me her husband's medication depended on that pension. These weren't numbers. These were people. Mason continued, "If we move forward, you and anyone else connected to this could be in danger. This level of white-collar crime isn't just about money, it's about control. Power. You need to be sure, Mr. Reed." "I am," I said without hesitation. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. That evening, someone tried to hack my email. Then my bank. Then my Wi-Fi cut out for 3 hours despite perfect weather. It wasn't a coincidence. Riley texted me. "They know." The next morning, I stepped out to get my mail and saw it, an unmarked black SUV parked half a block down. It didn't move for hours. Later that night, a rock shattered my office window. No note. Just a reminder. They weren't just watching. They were warning. I stared at the shards of glass and thought of Dana's voice again. "Don't let them make you small." I'd spent days in despair. Weeks doubting myself. No more. This wasn't about my career. It was about justice. And it was time I started planning my revenge, not for me but for everyone they'd buried behind spreadsheets and lies. After the rock smashed through my office window, something inside me finally clicked into place. I'd spent my whole life solving problems with numbers, audits, and quietly typed emails. But this wasn't just another spreadsheet error. This wasn't a passive oversight. This was war. And I was done playing nice. The very next day, I started laying the groundwork for what I knew had to be a perfectly timed, precisely executed takedown. There wouldn't be any second chances. First, I encrypted everything, again. My documents, Riley's files, the emails from Mason, the financial forensics, everything. Triple backups. One on a secure cloud server. One on an external drive hidden in a deposit box Ellie helped me secure. And a third, split across 2 thumb drives, each given to people I trusted in different cities. Then I reached out to Greg Walters, the former procurement officer who'd been quietly forced out 6 months before I was. I found him running a food truck on the east side of town. He didn't even blink when I approached. "They got you too?" he said over the sizzle of grilled onions. "Yeah. Figures." We sat on 2 overturned buckets behind the truck, and when I told him everything, Evergreen Holdings, the shell companies, the pension theft, even the sabotage of military-grade parts, he didn't ask if I was telling the truth. He just nodded and said, "I've got the old invoices. Backups. Stuff they thought I deleted." 2 days later, he handed me a manila envelope full of reports with handwritten notes and signatures that didn't match known vendor reps. I matched those with Riley's data logs. A story began to form. A clear, undeniable timeline of events, payments, approvals, cover-ups. A web. Then came the bigger piece. I needed someone still inside. That's when Teresa came back into the picture, my old assistant. She'd left shortly after me. But not before making some copies of her own. She met me in the parking lot of a local church, her eyes flicking constantly toward the road. "They're hiding the pension siphoning under deferred expense accounts," she whispered. "They're using phantom cost centers to bury millions. And Calvin," she looked me dead in the eye, "they're selling the company." "What?" "To a private firm, Silvergate Partners. Another shell. The employees don't know yet. It's happening within the quarter. Once the sale goes through, the liabilities, like the pensions, get renegotiated." My stomach dropped. They weren't just gutting Vandrix. They were killing it, and everyone who depended on it, for profit. "Can you prove it?" I asked. Teresa opened her coat, revealing a hard drive tucked into a specially sewn pocket. "I've got copies of everything. Emails. contracts. Even a video of Trent and Melinda discussing how to explain it to the board. Why give this to me? Because I know you'll actually do something with it. And because, her voice cracked, my dad worked on that factory floor for 38 years. His pension's all he has. They take that away, he won't survive it. I took the drive with trembling hands. This was it. The last piece. Now it was time to plan the strike. Riley, Greg, Teresa, and I formed an encrypted group chat we called Project Truth. Each of us had a role. Riley handled the digital forensics. She was tracing email chains, server logs, and metadata to show manipulation in real time. Greg was digging into vendor agreements showing how ghost companies were laundering money. Teresa continued feeding us current data from inside, all while pretending to still be on leave. I was the architect. The one threading it all together, building a master file with supporting evidence indexed and time-stamped, prepared for court, congressional oversight, and the media. Then I made a call I never thought I'd make. I reached out to a whistleblower attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Mara Singh out of Chicago. Ellie had worked with her once on a class action suit and said she had the moral compass of a judge and the bite of a shark. She listened patiently, then said one thing. Build your case like it's going to be picked apart by a dozen lawyers being paid $900 an hour to destroy you. If there's even one hole, they'll find it. So we need a nuke, not a bullet. I worked 14-hour days, barely sleeping. We held nightly video calls under VPN shielding, shared documents through military-grade encryption, and cross-verified every single document. Every vendor. Every transaction. Every fraudulent charge. And as we worked, the risk grew. One night I found tire tracks in my driveway that didn't match mine or Ellie's. Another day, Riley texted me in a panic. Her apartment door had been pried open, her hard drive missing. Good thing we had backups. We were getting close. Too close. Then one morning I got a message from Mason. We have an opening. But we need bait. I knew what that meant. Someone would have to confront the monster head-on. Someone they underestimated. Someone they thought was already beaten. I volunteered. Mara arranged the meeting through a mutual contact at Vandrix's HR, claiming I was considering signing their severance package after all, if they sweetened the pot. Melinda Crane herself agreed to meet. We chose the location, a neutral conference room at a hotel downtown. What she didn't know. That room had already been wired by federal agents, and the Department of Labor, SEC, and Department of Defense were all looped in. Riley was in a surveillance van with Mason watching the feed. Greg and Teresa were off-site, ready to release copies of the report to 5 news outlets the second I gave the signal. My heart pounded as I buttoned my shirt that morning, feeling a strange calm settle over me. It was almost time. After months of despair, discovery, and endless late nights building a digital sword, we were about to swing it. And Melinda Crane would never see it coming. I arrived at the Lakeshore Regency Hotel 15 minutes early. Neutral ground. Private meeting room. Just as Melinda Crane had requested. I walked into room 6A, polished oak table, frosted glass windows, filtered light, everything carefully chosen to create a sense of calm. But under the surface? Every corner was wired for sound. A hidden camera behind the thermostat. A second unit beneath the table. All courtesy of Mason's federal team, who were currently seated 3 doors down monitoring everything in real time. I had my role. I was the tired, desperate ex-employee just looking to settle. A man broken. She walked in 10 minutes late. Melinda always made you wait, it was part of her power game. But the second she stepped into that room, the air changed. She wore a navy suit like armor, designer heels clicking on the polished floor like a gavel. Calvin, she said with that same syrupy tone she'd used in the meeting where she fired me. I'm glad you came. She didn't sit right away. She placed her designer bag carefully on the chair beside her, pulled out a folder marked settlement, and laid it flat between us. I brought revised terms. 6 months severance instead of 3. Clean exit. No bad blood. I nodded like I was impressed. Generous. Melinda smiled. I'm nothing if not fair. I didn't smile back. Instead, I slowly opened my own folder and slid it toward her. What's this? I said nothing. She flipped the first page. Then the second. Her fingers froze. Her eyes narrowed. Internal emails. Wire transfer approvals. Vendor fraud documentation. Pension ledger manipulations. Military-grade part certifications showing falsified compliance. The color drained from her face as she flipped to the final document, a summary sheet titled, Northmere Financial Corruption and Federal Violations. Compiled evidence pending submission. She looked up, voice cold. Is this a threat? I met her gaze evenly. It's a fact. For the first time since I'd known her, Melinda Crane didn't have a rehearsed response. What do you want? She asked finally. To watch you fall, I said softly. Just like you made me. Right on cue, the door opened. 3 men in dark suits entered. Mason, a second agent from the SEC, and a uniformed Department of Defense liaison. Miss Crane, Mason said, holding up a document. We're issuing a warrant to seize all relevant financial and operational records from Vandrix Systems and Evergreen Holdings. You are not under arrest at this time, but you are required to accompany us for questioning. She stood abruptly. This is absurd. You have no idea what kind of mess you're creating? Another agent stepped into view. Actually, we do. That was the signal. I reached into my jacket and tapped my phone screen 3 times. Boom. Riley released the report to 5 news outlets. Greg uploaded invoice data to a public server. Teresa sent the whistleblower video directly to the Vandrix employee union and the media relations team. Within 10 minutes, it was everywhere. Shocking fraud uncovered at defense contractor. Vandrix pension scandal puts hundreds at risk. Feds investigate executive fraud in multi-million-dollar sabotage scheme. Melinda's phone buzzed. Then buzzed again. Then again. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for it. You'll regret this, she whispered, venom dripping from every syllable. No, I said, rising to leave. You will. As I stepped into the hallway, I saw 2 more agents escorting Trent Mallory down the corridor, his face pale, lips pressed in a hard line. He spotted me. You smug son of a... Watch your language, the agent said sharply. I walked past without another word. Outside the hotel, the sun was brighter than it had been in weeks. I took a long breath. We'd done it. But it wasn't over yet. That afternoon, Riley's encrypted backup servers were flooded with download requests. Investigators, lawyers, media outlets. Mara fielded a dozen interview requests from federal agencies. Greg was approached by a journalist to talk about systemic fraud in procurement chains. Teresa filed for whistleblower protection and was already being offered new jobs with better pay and stronger ethics. Me. I turned off my phone, poured a drink, and sat on my porch. For the first time in months, I didn't feel afraid. I felt still. That night, I got a call from Mason. They're spooked, he said. Turns out we just scratched the surface. The paper trail ties Evergreen to multiple shutdowns, 3 states, 2 federal contracts, and a long list of pension violations. It's big, Calvin. Good. Also, he added, someone's been trying to disappear records. Emails, purchase orders. But they were too late. You and your team got there first. I didn't do it alone, I said. Riley, Teresa, Greg, they all risked everything. And because of that, he said, there's going to be real accountability. You're saving lives, Calvin. Not just jobs. Lives. I didn't respond right away. I looked at the photo of Dana on my desk. She always told me to do what's right, even when it hurts. Now it was finally starting to heal. 3 days after Melinda and Trent were escorted out of that hotel in handcuffs, my phone rang again, this time from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Then I got a second call. Then a third. Then a text message lit up my screen. You don't know what you've started. Call me. BV. Bryce Vandrix. The heir who'd sold his father's company to the vultures and disappeared into luxury years ago. I hadn't heard from him since the acquisition. Curiosity got the better of me. I answered the 4th call. Calvin, Bryce said smoothly, you've made quite the mess. Funny, I replied. I thought I cleaned one up. Pause. Then he spoke again, calm, measured, rehearsed. You're playing checkers in a chess game. Evergreen isn't a mistake, it's a firewall. The real assets are buried in a holding structure 5 layers deep. You've exposed the fall guys. Not the architects. I exposed your pension fraud, I snapped. And your weapons contract fraud. That's not a fall guy. That's prison time. Another pause. That depends. How well do you think your daughter's career will survive a defamation lawsuit? She's on your email chains. Legal advisory. That makes her complicit in the wrong context. My stomach tightened. You leave her out of this. She's already in it, Calvin. You put her there. I said nothing. His voice dropped to a whisper. You should have taken the severance. Retired quietly. Instead, you've burned the bridge in the village. That kind of disruption, it always costs more than it's worth. The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a long moment, rage and fear battling in my chest. Then I called Mara. She answered mid-sentence, already typing. I was expecting your call, she said. You saw it? Bryce is playing his card. But it's sloppy. He just admitted there's a deeper structure. That's our in. I don't care about the company anymore, I said. But if he drags Ellie into this. He won't, Mara cut in. He can't. He thinks he's 2 moves ahead, but we just forced the board to look beneath the table. Evergrene's collapsing. Now we find the next shell. Over the next 72 hours, Mara and Mason coordinated a full-scale financial dig. With subpoenas authorized, a forensic accounting team unearthed a complex structure. Shell after shell, layered through offshore accounts, consulting firms, and holding groups with generic names like Briarbridge Ventures and Trident Holdings. But they missed one fatal flaw. Pride. Bryce had routed $2.3 million in Vandrick's pension money through a company registered in the name of his private yacht, Serafina Blue. One paper trail. One matching date. And one slip of arrogance. That was all it took. By the time federal agents closed in, Bryce had already boarded a jet bound for the Caymans. But he never landed. Interpol detained him mid-transfer in Bermuda. Extradition paperwork followed. The news broke within hours. CO Air faces international fraud charges in explosive defense contract scandal. Vandrick's whistleblowers catalyze largest pension recovery suit in state history. But amid the chaos, one last twist emerged, one none of us had expected. Riley called me late one night, voice shaking. Calvin, we missed something. She sent me a PDF, an old employee roster from Vandrick's. Look at the project manager listed on the Bentonville military parts contract. The one with falsified safety reports. I scanned the page. Name Dana Reed. My late wife. I felt like the air had been sucked from my lungs. What is this? I whispered. She wasn't listed as deceased. Her ID was still active. They used her credentials months after she died. Calvin, they forged her approvals. I sat down hard, bile rising in my throat. They hadn't just stolen money. They had used my wife's name to cover their lies, to pass defective military equipment into the field. The same woman who'd built half of Vandrick's early compliance systems by hand. She was a ghost in their system, Riley said. And now that Bryce is caught, they're trying to scrub the digital trail. But I backed it all up. My hands trembled as I clicked through the files. Her signature copied and pasted, used on reports, safety certifications, emails sent long after her death. They desecrated her, I choked out. For profit. Then let's make sure the world sees it, Riley said. And we did. Mara sent the discovery to every federal agency involved. The public outcry was immediate. What had begun as a quiet accounting purge had now become a moral reckoning. The theft of a woman's name, her legacy, her life's work, to pass off lethal products and defraud the government. The Department of Defense reopened every contract tied to Vandrick's over the past decade. Congress demanded hearings. And my wife's name? Was cleared on the record. In front of the world. 6 months later, I stood under a slate-gray sky at the rededication ceremony for the newly renamed Dana Reed Compliance Center, carved into the marble lobby of what used to be Vandrick Systems. It didn't look like the place I'd left. Gone were the glossy PR posters, the sterile executive suites. In their place were framed portraits of factory veterans, community volunteers, and Dana, smiling, clipboard in hand, caught mid-laugh by a candid shot I'd forgotten even existed. Calvin, said a voice behind me. It was Teresa, holding a steaming coffee and wearing a visitor badge clipped to her windbreaker. You ready? I nodded. As I'll ever be. We walked into the main hall together, joining a growing crowd of employees, reporters, and community members. At the podium stood Ellie, flanked by a Department of Labor official and a state senator. Today, Ellie said, we don't just honor those who blew the whistle on corruption. We honor the everyday people who believed in something bigger than a paycheck. People like Dana Reed, who made it her mission to make sure safety and integrity weren't optional. The applause was thunderous. And I stood there rooted, tears slipping down my cheek, because for the first time in a long time, they weren't tears of grief. They were gratitude. Poetic justice, they call it. It didn't come quickly. Or cleanly. Or without scars. But it came. After Bryce Vandrick's was extradited, he pled guilty to conspiracy, securities fraud, and embezzlement. He tried to cut a deal, but the evidence, thanks to Riley, Greg, Teresa, and every brave soul who stood up, was too overwhelming. Melinda Crane, facing decades in prison, flipped. She revealed the layered structure Bryce had hidden, the shell companies, the payoff accounts, even the plan to fake a cyber attack to wipe records once the sale to Silvergate Partners went through. Trent Mallory refused to cooperate. He got 18 years. But the real victory? The pension fund was restored. Every last cent. A federal restitution program, fueled by asset seizures and matched state grants, repaid the employees who had nearly lost everything. Many had already retired. People like Mark, the machinist with arthritis who finally got to fix up his fishing cabin. Or Janice, whose husband got the medication he needed after all. The factory itself was absorbed by a workers' cooperative, rebranded as Legacy Works Manufacturing. They offered me a consulting role, head of ethical finance systems. I declined. I don't want to be part of a new system, I told them. I just want to help others build it. Instead, I joined a nonprofit that teaches ethics and corporate finance to young professionals. I guest lecture. I mentor whistleblowers. I share my story. And when I walk past that bronze plaque bearing Dana's name, I smile. Because she's still protecting people. Just in a different way now. The house is quieter these days, but it doesn't feel empty anymore. Ellie visits often. We sit on the porch, drinking coffee and watching the sun rise over the same street I once thought I'd never leave again. Any regrets? She asked me once. I thought about it. Thought about the fear. The isolation. The days I questioned my sanity. Then I shook my head. No, I said. Because I didn't do it for revenge. I looked at her. I did it to tell the truth. And sometimes, the truth doesn't just come out. It blows the whole damn lie wide open. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.